This first member sent me an email and said, the more I surround myself with real love, the more I seem to be losing old friends. Have other people noticed that? If so, why is it? Actually makes perfect sense. The friends that we had before real love, we formed on the basis of trading imitation love. I'll praise you, you give me power, and so on. The variations are infinite. And when you adopt real love as a way of living, and you stop trading, it confuses the people that you've known all your life. Like, what happened to you? Confuses and sometimes even irritates them. And many of those friends who are accustomed to the rules of trading leave, and it's understandable. After all, you changed the rules. So why would they want to hang around somebody who's changed the rules of the friendship? You continue. I have a friend who I like very much, and she's from New York City and has a super assertive personality. Actually, the phrases New York City and super assertive personality are redundant. You say, I look like a sweet lamb in comparison. And for those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, she lives not far from New York City and has a somewhat assertive personality herself. So super assertive personality would be alarming. You say, I like her, but sometimes I find her personality and her taking over to be a bit much. Is there any way that I can intervene to take on a bigger role or push back? Never push back. Never fight a controller. Never join a fight. Just because somebody invites you to a perfectly good fight doesn't mean you have to join. So then what can you do? It almost never helps to tell somebody to stop something or to change what they're doing. They take it as criticism, and a super assertive person is going to take it as an invitation to a fight. So what can you do? Just speak up when you want to. So if you're speaking and she, being super assertive, interrupts or goes to take over, you simply gently, no expression of annoyance on your face, or you've started a fight. People who call me on the phone often say, all I did was, and then they describe something that sounds perfectly innocent, but then I ask them if there was any irritation in their voice. Well, which means yes, there was. As soon as you're irritated, you've begun a conflict. So if you're speaking and she goes to take over, you just put your hand up. Everybody in the world recognizes this sign. And you say, I wasn't finished. Or you can speak in just a minute, but I want to finish this thought. Very few people will continue speaking past that, even the most assertive people, because they don't want to look rude. And very few people have the courage to do this and say, I wasn't finished yet, because they think it's rude. It's not rude. If you were speaking and somebody interrupts, you're a fool if you don't put your hand up and say, I wasn't finished. And you identify yourself as a doormat, and people will walk all over you. So it's your obligation, if you are the speaker, to hold the floor. Not by doing it with conflict, just by simply stating, I'm not done. In fact, there's a useful generalization here. On the whole, you can always ask for what you want or state what you will do rather than telling other people what to do or what not to do. Another example being, somebody said, my mother comes into the kitchen when I'm preparing a meal and takes over. And of course, mom's been doing this for years. You have to keep in mind that every time you allow somebody to, quote, take over. You can't claim that they took over anymore, because if they come in and take over and you don't say anything, you just gave them permission to do it. You don't realize you did, but that's how they take it. And so the next time they unconsciously say, well, she didn't mind last time, and they mean it. She didn't mind, so I'll do it again. So if you don't like it, you really have to say something. So I recommended to this woman, reach out and touch your mother. The reason to touch somebody is because it gets their attention. It's really kind of alarming how little we touch each other. And so when you touch somebody, they will immediately look at you. So touch her and say, I've got this. You relax in the living room. I'm preparing the meal. Now, at that point, people will very often, because they're used to being in charge, because they're used to being controllers, they'll say, oh, well, I was just trying to help. Never explain yourself. You just raise your hand again and say, I've got this. You relax in the living room. I'm preparing this meal. You just repeat what you said. They'll catch on, I promise. They're just not used to telling people that they can't take over. Controllers are controllers because people let them do it. Now, if you don't mind her helping, okay, but you have to give her a very specific job to do. And then when she's done, again, touch her and say, okay, thank you for doing that. Now I've got the rest of it. But I'll warn you that once you let her in there, she's going to do what I said, take over. So it's about stating what we want and stating it very clearly and stating it early on without fear. If you're afraid or angry when you state what you want, you're pretty dead, because that's how fights start. Let me give you an illustration of what we just talked about stating what we want. Here's somebody who says, I have a friend who always calls me from the car using her Bluetooth in the car. I have the hardest time hearing her when she uses her Bluetooth. But she says, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't make the Bluetooth any better. But I hate it when she calls me on her Bluetooth from the car. What can I do? I have that problem sometimes with people. They use some kind of device that interferes with the quality of the call. Either they're in the car and I can hear road noise. They use a Bluetooth that just slightly diminishes the quality of the call, or they use a speakerphone. And I immediately ask them, because I don't think in all the years I've asked, I've been wrong, maybe a couple times. You can tell when the quality of the call isn't good. I say, are you on a Bluetooth or speakerphone? They answer, well, yeah. And they answer, yeah, like, well, duh, like, what's wrong with that? Because they don't identify the decreased quality of the call. They're in the road noise. It turns out it affects them less than it does the person who's on the other end of the phone. And so I say, I'm missing a lot of your words, and I want to hear everything you say. That's another way to say it. And then they usually offer to change it. So they'll say, oh, well, then I'll get off my speakerphone and use the regular phone. Is that better? Very often is. If they're in a car and they can't get off their Bluetooth, they can't hold their phone to their ear, then I ask them if they want to arrange a time to speak later when they can use a clearer device or when they're not on the road. And at that point, if people have made an appointment a week ahead of time to talk to me, they demonstrate how much they want the call. If they say, oh, well, I can't get off my Bluetooth, clearly they didn't want to talk very much, because it turns out that pretty much everywhere you go, there are shoulders on the road, parking lots, exits. People who want a call can get off the road. They can get off their Bluetooth. They can. So anybody who tells you they can't, that's not true. Otherwise, listening when the quality of the call is poor, is exhausting. Listening for every other word and trying to piece them together like a jigsaw puzzle, exhausting and not nearly as intimate, which is the purpose of the call. If they refuse, which is almost never happened, then I just say, well, then I'll talk to you at a time that's a later time that's more convenient for you. And then when they write and ask for a time, I give them a time in, like next year. If a call isn't important to somebody else, it becomes a whole lot less important to me. Notice, you don't tell people what to do or what not to do. You simply state what you need and what you will do. That's the generalization. And it tends to work very, very well. I've used it a few hundred times. Here's somebody who writes and says, I want to talk about dating. The dating process is frustrating and tiring, but I'm not ready to give up on it. What can you recommend to keep a positive attitude despite the reality that I have to meet a great many men where I think, not really, or even, you've got to be kidding me. Do you have anything to tell me that would keep my spirits up? Sure. It's all about your attitude. You don't care how many men there are out there. You only need one. It's all about your attitude. Another great way to state an attitude is next. The sooner that you find out that somebody isn't a potentially unconditionally loving partner, the better. Much better to find it out in the first phone call than after 10 years and 3 kids. And if you have to go through 99 guys to find one, it's worth it. In a productive gold mine, a mine that they consider to be fairly rich, the yield is about 1 ounce per ton. So that's 32,000 to 1. And yet they do it eagerly because it's worth finding those little bits of gold. Finding a partner is worth that. So I would suggest any number of those things to change your attitude about dating. Of course, you're going to find ore in the pile that isn't gold. That's just part of the process. If you want to find a partner and you're not willing to deal with having conversations with people who are obviously not suitable, then you probably shouldn't be dating. Here's somebody who says, would you comment on a phrase that people use a lot, both in and out of real love? People say, everything happens for a reason. My first comment would be the people who use that phrase in real love are simply bringing something that's not part of real love into real love, because that's never been part of real love. It's not found in any of the million books and millions of pages and words, and it's nowhere. For a reason, that phrase implies that there is a purpose to everything that occurs. In order for there to be a purpose, then there would have to be a guiding hand for every single thing that happens, right? It's actually kind of obvious. That's what the phrase means. In other words, God puts us in situations or creates situations so that we can learn or grow or be happy. One word for that, wrong. That would mean that mostly we are like pets being trained by a master. Here's the hoop I've created. Now jump through this hoop that I have created, because everything's for a reason. Then stand on 2 legs and dance in a circle, and so on. No. God might occasionally create circumstances where, for example, 2 people might meet, or occasionally alter events for our benefit. But on the whole, stuff just happens. Stuff just happens according to natural law. tornadoes just happen. Tornadoes don't happen because God causes tornadoes. Now, in fairness, God, depends on your view of God, created the earth and the earth's crust, and when the sun hits the earth's crust, there's uneven heating and winds are generated, and if they're generated in the right way, then we get tornadoes and hurricanes. But God doesn't specifically create tornadoes and hurricanes. Whether we find a reason in what happens depends on how we choose. So whether we choose to learn, for example, or whether we choose to be hurt and angry. We choose to do what we know is right. We choose to listen in whatever circumstance. There is so much stuff just happening around us because of natural law and because of the choices of other people. God doesn't need to create every little event. There are plenty of events happening around us. Commenting on what I just said, in a coaching conference call, somebody said, but on the other hand, they were having a hard time digesting this. Isn't saying everything happens for a reason kind of like having faith? My girlfriend, who is often confused by why things happen, just likes to say, well, everything happens for a reason. No, it's not really like faith. It's more like fate. And fate and faith, although turns out that they share 3 letters, aren't even similar. More like primitive cultures that had to create a pantheon, a host of gods with different personalities to explain what happens. Everything happens for some mysterious reason. And so they would create reasons. Zeus was in a good mood or a bad mood. And did X. Apollo ate a sour grape, so he did Y. Not faith, more like fate. And we really don't need to see it that way. Instead, God created an enormous and intricate and complex world where lots of things would happen, and he knew that we would have to deal with those lots of things, like natural phenomena, hurricanes, gravity, houses fall down with gravity over years and years, dirt plus rain, and if we properly cultivate it and plant it, turns into fields of crops. But dirt plus rain also equals mud, which can become a real obstacle. Mud wasn't created for a reason. Mud happens when rain falls on dirt. It just does. Go out in my backyard. God didn't create the mud in my backyard. Rain did. And we have plenty of people to deal with. People who make their own choices, often selfish choices, that affect us. Occasionally, God might reach in and alter things, but he does not create bad things that will test us. That's one of the most common reasons that people use this phrase. Everything happens for a reason when something bad happens. So, for a reason. Well, God gave me this test to see how I do. Oh, please. There's enough going on without God creating individual little tests for us, I promise you. And here's somebody who says, after the conference call where I initially answered this question, I too have that belief, and I say it as a sort of lesson, like, well, this happened for a reason, though I may not see it right now, and there's nothing to be learned from this. For example, a couple of years ago, I had my first night terror, which became a traumatic event for me. I went to therapy, and that's where I learned about real love. At the time of that event, I was hating it, and I wasn't saying everything happens for a reason. But now I look back on it as a blessing, and I can see that the reason for that to happen was to discover real love. Is that not correct thinking? No. Because thousands and thousands of people have night terrors and learn absolutely nothing from them. God didn't give you a night terror so you would go to therapy and learn about real love. a long series of events in your life led to night terrors, very likely starting in childhood. Then you chose to go to therapy. And it is possible, possibly even likely, that God could have put a particular therapist's name in your mind. That's called inspiration, so that you could be referred to real love. But see, it involved a choice on your part. It's not the night terror that created this. You could have found real love in another way. Another illustration. What event in my life, mine personally, most led me to real love? Now, I would love to say it was brilliance and, contemplation and a flash of insight. And no, drug addiction. Did God create drugs so that I would find real love? If there's anybody who can really say that with a straight face, let me know. No, he didn't. Or did he cause me to inject myself with narcotics so I would eventually end up in drug treatment and be led to real love? No. Lots of things just happened. And then we make choices to learn or not learn. But the things are almost always just things, not created for the reason we made them into later with our choices. Just because two things are associated doesn't mean that they are causally related. 95% of people who die of cancer drank orange juice in the previous year. Well, then orange juice was created to cause cancer. See how silly this gets? Nor is there shown to be any causal relationship between orange juice and cancer. You can't put two events that just happen to be in sequence or close to each other and say that one caused the other. Continuing from this man who was speaking after the conference call. My girlfriend says this a lot too when she's feeling anxious. She has said now and prior to her practicing real love that it puts her at ease to know that everything happens for a reason. It's like she has faith that she is taken care of by God and trusts that. It's not that it puts her at ease, it gives her a sense of comfort that everything's going to turn out all right in the end. But that doesn't mean that God created things for a reason. Now, this is where we can dovetail everything happens for a reason into what I've been saying. What we're really trying to say is that God has a hand in everything. Yeah, he really does, especially if we're listening. But his hand is far less in the events than in the guiding of us to learn from the things that happen. Plenty of things, plenty. He doesn't need to make events. This is not to belittle the significance of your night terrors or my addiction or anybody's experiences. They mattered, but they mattered because then we made choices that made them matter. Choice is the single greatest principle in the universe. Not God micro-manipulating and micromanaging everything that happens around us. That would considerably diminish the importance of choice, and choice is number one. Here's somebody who says, I'm seeing my people-pleasing to be more pervasive than I originally thought. It's how I live, full stop. I'm not sure how to not people-please. So what is the opposite of people-pleasing? Is it me-pleasing? That's cute. I don't think I've ever read that before. No, it's loving, unconditional loving. For example, I know this person who's writing this. My relationship with you. I don't do anything to please you. That would almost sound insulting to somebody who's used to a world where all we do is trade favors and where we do please people. I don't do anything to please you. I simply love you. I care about you. Sometimes you accept it. Sometimes that pleases you, but I didn't do it for that reason. And sometimes you don't accept it. Sometimes it doesn't please you. But I don't love you so that anything, so that you'll get it, so that you'll be happier, so that you'll be loved. Because if I love you or do anything for you so that you'll something, by definition, I've changed it into conditional love. Do you see? Because I have a condition set on it. So that. People pleasers always have an agenda. Always. I don't. You continue. I'm seeing how people pleasers really aren't all that fun to be around. They act like they want to please you, but the truth is that they can only see themselves and what they want from you. That's brilliant of you to observe. Pleasers do what they do for your approval. It's a trade. They manipulate and control you. But if they're skilled, they manipulate and control you in a way you like, so you don't notice it. You continue, and pleasers are boring. I was out with a people pleaser friend who was trying to do whatever I wanted, like all the time, and I could see myself in this friend of mine. And it was boring. I am boring when I people please. That's lovely to hear you say. Yes, because you're not being you. You're just pretending to be what other people want. People pleasers aren't genuine. You continue. So, is it true that the people I'm pleasing don't really know their preferences either? They have chosen something for the sake of choosing and feel a sense of power when people comply. Yes, almost everyone has no idea who they are or what they want, really, because they're too busy being what other people want, pleasing, or gathering power from pleasers, or protecting themselves from fearful or angry or manipulative people. It's just one great big trading fest in the world. You continue. It would be worth noting that I get imitation love when I people please, although usually I'm not aware of it. It seems that I'm trying to people please you by being quiet, for example, when we Skype. She's talking to me now. I got a lot of praise from both mom and dad for being quiet. And yeah, we do tend to do the things that we learned as kids. So I've buried myself deep. It's easier for me to shut up versus expressing something that I pushed out of awareness. My monster is passive and invisible. I can sense that I will find my gems there. And yes, this is where the fun comes in. How do I work on this? There are lots of ways to work on this. You already did the hardest thing. You've noticed that you're a people pleaser. You've admitted it. You've said that you find yourself boring when you do it. You gave a very specific example of you doing it with me. So you're already telling the truth about it. And as you tell the truth about your being a people pleaser, what do you see from me? Am I disgusted? Am I annoyed? Am I telling you should stop? In fact, there's no should here at all. Am I irritated? Am I saying, until you quit this, I'm not going to talk to you again? No. I'm accepting you. So you've told the truth and you've been accepted already. You've already taken a huge step. And then you might practice the next time that we're on a Skype call doing something that I call unedited talking. Watch people talk. There's actually a great big school of philosophy called NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, where they talk about how when we're remembering something, we look, I can't even remember now, up and to the left, and when we're thinking, we're looking up and to the right, and they can tell you all about what you're doing by, where your eyes move and whether you're sweating and, whether your eyes are darting back and forth. But just forget all the details. Just watch people when they talk. You can tell that they're carefully considering what they're saying. In fact, you can even sometimes watch people once you know that people do this, and they're going, if I say this, well, then people will think that. If I say this, people will think that. And so they appear to be thinking to be careful. And what they're really doing is avoiding disapproval. In unedited talking, or speaking, I don't recommend you do this with everybody because they'll think you're babbling and you might end up getting punched in the face. But with somebody who cares about you, say whatever comes to your mind. Anything, no matter how absurd, rude, silly, childish, crazy, just talk. And if the person that you're talking to has any experience in being a wise person and unconditionally cares about you, you'll learn a lot about yourself by the things that you say when you're not carefully weighing your words. It's pretty fun to watch somebody do this. Next person says, I have to tell you about something cool that I just did. I came home to a house smelling like something was burning. And it was. I thought you were going to say, and I discovered I had a brain tumor. Something was burning. I was making some coffee on the burner, and I went to the store, and I accidentally left the coffee maker on. So it had been burning dry for a good 35 minutes or so. The house was just stinky. Anyway, after I walked through the house, tracking the snow behind me and turned it off, I just got to work cleaning up my mess. And when I was done, I said, well, at least the pot got a good cleaning. How calm. Not like you would have done things in the past. You say, the reason why this is so cool is because this same thing happened about 3 years ago. I burned the pot dry, stunk up the house. I raged and fumed and was unkind to people all day long. Everybody walked on eggshells and tried to make me happy. No luck. I wasn't going to have anything of it. But this time, no problem. I just cleaned up my mess. I wasn't irritated at all. I actually laughed at how I reacted in the past. And even the snow on the floor didn't bother me. Is that cool? Or what? Almost identical circumstances. So what changed? You. So in going back to where we started earlier in the chat, God didn't burn the coffee for a reason. Coffee just burns when you leave the stove, when you leave the coffee maker on. When you come in from outside and don't take your boots off, you track snow through the house. God didn't do that for a reason. But then we get to choose whether we learn something from it or we get angry or just react to it or whatever. Right after that, you continue, my 7-year-old daughter spilled her milk on the table. Again, no anger, ! I started to clean it up and she said, no, don't clean it up. And so when she said, don't clean it up, instead of doing what I would have done in the past, which would have been to insist on cleaning it up, I just sat down and I listened to her. And it turns out she wanted to slurp it up with her straw. So we all had fun with that, slurping up her milk with a straw that was spread out all over the table. And then she wiped up what was left. And it was all great fun instead of just a mess and then an irritation. Notice, all a choice. You conclude, wow, my life is so much different than it used to be. And I'm grateful. And it's because you're choosing differently. Here's a Sylvie story. Turns out I call them Sylvie stories now, even if they don't involve Sylvie, because that's sort of how they started out. This one happens to involve her 3-year-old, is he 3? 3-year-old brother. Bruce. Bruce, this is his mother telling me this because the 3-year-old doesn't write to me much. Bruce wanted to be a tiger. So he took a pen and he made stripes all over his body. He loves to be naked, so it's easy to draw. And I saw this and I said, now I want you to notice, his mother, Jeanette, didn't say, don't, or no, or how many times have I told you? And she wasn't irritated. She said, Bruce, what is the rule? This is very important, because if you ask a kid what the rule is and they state the rule, they remember it 10 times better than if you simply repeat it, which they roll their eyes at and just pretty much discard. And Bruce said, no markers on the skin. Apparently, he has heard this rule before. So then, Jeanette cut up some felt and glued it to a pair of jeans. And then she said to him, will this be okay? And he said, yes, I am a tiger. So he learned to be creative. He remembered the rule. Nobody got mad. Everybody felt loved. Bruce had fun. Parenting with loving and teaching is quite different from parenting in any other way. Here's somebody who said, I just finished a call to Sally, a wise person. It did not go well at all. At the beginning of the call, I did not state the purpose of the call. I was just calling to chat and catch up because she and I are friends. It was not a real love call. I was not looking for a wise person. But when she started asking me questions and acting as a wise person, I became afraid because I didn't know what to do. When we don't know what to do, we often become afraid. We're afraid of confusion and ignorance. So instead of clarifying the intention of the call, I continued to answer her questions. People can't read our minds. Sally couldn't read your mind. She thought you wanted support. Doesn't matter why she thought that. So her efforts to do that were well-meaning. And you are brilliant to identify that you made the mistake, not her, when you could have so easily blamed her. You blew it twice. You didn't define the purpose of the call, and then you kept answering her wise person questions. You continue. You can imagine that it went downhill from there. Yes, easily. Two people who have different and conflicting purposes trying to have a conversation. I've only seen that 10,000 times, and the results are predictably bad. She could sense my fear, you say. However, she was believing that it was fear about the topic of the discussion. And so she kept trying to help me see something differently. In other words, it got worse because she kept trying to be a wise person. And I didn't see it. And I stated so. But I still didn't stop her. And I allowed her to continue trying to teach me. Then I got defensive and I told her, it feels like you're digging for something here. Even though I knew things had just gone wrong and I wanted to end the call, I didn't. So your fear really bit you, didn't it? The call ended with her saying that she needed to go, and after the call, I texted her and said, I made a mistake that set the tone for the call we just completed. This is a great example of truth-telling. I was just calling to talk and catch up, not to make a real love call or looking for a wise person, but I didn't tell you that. When I saw that happening, I got afraid and not knowing what to do. And that likely was the fear that you sensed. And then I did get defensive. I didn't have a need to talk about the subjects that you asked me questions about, but I kept answering your questions. All my fault. Now I know how to be clearer and sooner next time. Perfect. You admitted your mistake. Beautiful. Yeah, good enough. She said it perfectly. I don't need to add anything to it. Lady named Jill called me and she said, I just feel like I'm not here. I've been like that for weeks. I'm not doing my homework from college and I'm just not involved in stuff. And I said, are you going to school? She said, oh, most of the time. I said, because I know she goes to church, I said, have you been going to church? No. I said, tell me what your room looks like. Where are you sitting? She said, in my room. I said, what does it look like? She said, it looks like a disaster. It looks like a landfill. I said, how do you get the money that you spend on food and clothing? Well, I get it from my parents. I have to bug them to give it to me every single time, and it's really getting annoying, she said. I said, let me teach you a lesson that I taught my children long ago. Work makes us happy and strong. And you're not working. You're not being responsible. You're not going to school regularly. You're not working. You're not cleaning your room. You're expecting your parents to give you money. And yeah, I know you just don't feel like it. Well, tough. I love you. God loves you. Other people love you. But that's only one leg of the three legs of the stool of happiness. You're not being loving to other people, and you're certainly not being responsible. If you want to be responsible, clean your room. Later that day, she sent me a text that said, I'm cleaning my room, and I'm liking it. My children used to complain when we'd go outside and one of them would whine, and I'd say, why do we work? And they'd all say at the same time, because work makes us happy and strong. And they couldn't have been more sarcastic. But I've lived long enough now to get to hear their children say, work makes us happy and strong. And I derive considerable pleasure from hearing that. So she cleaned her room. She started doing her homework. The more we do for the right reasons, not out of guilt or obligation, I said, the happier you'll feel. And the more you'll feel like doing even more. So your next task is to get a job. Now, start with a part-time job if necessary. Go to a temp agency and get a job. What could you do to be loving? You could look every day consciously for 2 loving acts that you could do for somebody else. Only when we feel loved, we're loving other people, and we're responsible, do we feel happy. Simply being loved alone turns us into pretty much pets. Because that's what we do with pets. We just love them. They don't have responsibilities. And those of you who want to protest that your pets love you, you're dreaming. Your pet never sits around and wonders how you're doing. Your pet just wags his tail or purrs or whatever they do when you give them attention. Our pets simply love it that we love them. One thing at a time. You can't change it all at once. So when it comes to being responsible, one thing at a time. Or you'll want to quit. You'll get overwhelmed. People will write me when they're just learning to work and they'll say, I feel so overwhelmed. There's no such thing as overwhelmed. Because every job is broken down into anywhere from 1 to 100,000 pieces. And you do them one at a time. How do you move a mountain? A shovelful at a time. How do you build a backyard? A shovelful at a time. You make a list and you just start doing it. Here's somebody who says, my daughter, Lisa, is back home from college for a few weeks, and we're quite quickly back to some of the same tensions and stuff that we experienced before she left. Well, predictable, regrettably. I know her. She's a bright kid. She's also somewhat entitled, and she knows how to manipulate and how to provoke emotional reactions from you. She lived with you for all these years. She knows exactly what it takes to push your buttons. And once she's gotten you angry, well, then she can just say, well, you're angry, and she doesn't have to listen to you anymore. So she uses real love against you. She's very clever. You say, I've talked to her about some of the things that are required of her for living here, but not written them down for her to be crystal clear about what her choice to live here is during the holiday means, which is my mistake. Only a little mistake. Because she's actually completely gaming you. She's playing with you. She already knows exactly what is expected of her. And she's making you do the work of describing and remembering it for her. Every responsible person knows what responsible means. Even when you go over to somebody else's house and they make dinner for you and you're a complete guest, you're not a child of the person who invited you over. Every responsible person knows that it's responsible to say, well, what can I do to help? And then the host may choose to have you do some small thing or some big thing or nothing at all. Your daughter knows she has responsibilities at home and she's making you do all the work. It's not an accident. Kids always do less than what they know is reasonable and responsible and loving. And then they say, and you're falling for it, oh, because it's not written down, oh, I didn't know that you wanted blank, whatever it is. How do I know that the kid is gaming you? How do I know that kids are always faking it when they pretend that they don't know what they're supposed to do? The example I use, I think, in the parenting book is you go to a store 100 times in a row and the store owner charges you the wrong amount for what you buy. How do you know whether the store owner is stupid or blind or a cheater? Actually, really easily. You bring your receipts back with the amount that he over or undercharged, and if he overcharged you 50% of the time and undercharged you 50% of the time, then he's either blind or stupid or both. If he overcharged you 100% of the time, he is a cheater. And when was the last time a kid ever said, oh, well, you said clean. I thought you meant clean the whole house and mow the lawn and rake the leaves and do the laundry and everything else. There's been no kid in recorded history who's ever done that. You said, I'm learning a lot about myself with her being back here. It's helping me see that I'm not as far on my real love journey as I thought I was. Pretty much every life event reminds us of that. And she now thinks that she's independent and invincible. Your daughter does. She comes home only occasionally, so now she believes that she can behave as an honored guest. In fact, a rude one. You said, is there anything that you would change about anything in this list, the list that is going to follow, or the way I've written it, before I give it to her? It would be for the rest of the holiday. This was the Christmas holiday, so I'm a little late getting to it. Also to help her decide whether she really wants to come back for the Easter holidays or go somewhere else. Good for you, because if she doesn't eagerly comply with the requirements to be a member of the family, even during holidays, well, then for Easter, you're going to be only too glad that she goes somewhere else. You said if she's not enthusiastic about these requirements, I'm not enthusiastic about her living here and might withdraw the option. Again, good for you. The disease of entitlement is spreading over the world like a fire. I'm not kidding. It is rare that I have underestimated or been surprised by the behavior of human beings. And entitlement has caught me by surprise. It is growing exponentially fast. I grossly underestimated the speed and the depth of it. So here are the requirements for choosing to live here, even during the holidays. New rule: no watching, movies and stuff in the kitchen while you're making food or sitting at the kitchen table eating. It's disconnecting and it's distracting both for you and us. Good rule. It also needs to be made clear that she will break this rule. You tell her that. And then she'll use what I call the I forgot gambit. So you're going to stop this gambit. This is like in chess, ahead of time. Absurd. She doesn't forget to take her exams at school. Oh, I forgot I had my final exam today. She doesn't forget her birthday. She forgets the things she doesn't want to do and which she thinks she can get away with forgetting. And you need to tell her this ahead of time so she doesn't use it. And you admit that's your fault because you have let her use this excuse in the past. If she tests you by saying, I forgot, you tell her she can live wherever she wants. But if she wants to live with you, there are rules that govern happiness there. The whole universe runs by law, by laws that make us happy. And we can't violate them without consequence. And she thinks she can. Second rule, no using phones at the table while eating. This is one of those because we're sitting at the table, not just to get food down. Otherwise, we would just each pass by the sink and, we'd be force-fed like geese. It's a stupid thing to allow kids to use their phones at the table. It's just rude. It just says, I don't care about you to everybody else who's at the table. Another rule. My other daughter and I will say a prayer before meals. We had quit doing this while you were here, but we will resume, and you will make no sighs or disparaging comments either about our praying or about our religious beliefs ever. None. Because the daughter who's visiting doesn't believe in any of that stuff. Notice, you're not requiring, this is a good rule. Notice, you're not requiring that she pray with you, which would be really foolish to do and intrusive. Just that she respect your beliefs and your religious practices, which is entirely reasonable. I went to the Blue Mosque, the Sultan Ahmed Mosque in Istanbul. I don't practice Islam, but I certainly didn't point fingers at the people who were kneeling in prayer and laugh at them. That would have been considered incredibly rude and unloving. And actually there I might have ended up in a Turkish jail. Everybody knows that that's a rude thing to do. And she's done this stuff in the past because she's gotten away with it. Well, now she's not. Another rule. No leaving personal things lying around in the shared areas. Shoes are to be put away on shoe racks and in the hall. Clear up food in the kitchen straight after eating. It's simple. You just don't make work for other people. And she knows this. And if she acts surprised when she gets these rules, again, she's gaming you. She knows these are reasonable. Her roommate doesn't let her get away with this crap at school, I promise you. Unless her roommate's a people pleaser and she's managed to train her. Next rule, be willing to learn about real love while you're at home. Willingly attend family meetings and listen to video chats. I would not do this one. The others are reasonable and simply common sense responsible. But now that she's an adult, at least chronologically speaking, you can't really be dictating what she learns. So I would certainly not require her to learn real love. In fact, with an adult, it's kind of contradictory. Next, last rule. Be open to feedback about behaviors that I see you using which affect your happiness. If not from me, then from someone else in real love. By choosing to live here, my assumption will be that you are asking and that you are willing to move on from the past, and you are open and enthusiastic about learning to become happier. No, I wouldn't do this one either. This is a reasonable assumption to make if somebody attends a loving group. So if somebody comes to a loving group and says, well, I don't want any feedback. I want to speak, but I don't want any feedback, and I don't want anybody to speak to me. Then you're in the wrong room. Because anybody who comes to a loving group agrees to get feedback and to learn, or to at least appear to learn, try to learn. But you don't get to do this with an adult child. If she wants to be unhappy as an adult, you're not going to change that during brief breaks from college. But you can require her behavior not to be rude and thoughtless, which is what all the other rules do. It's a lot of questions. Sometimes they seem complicated, but the more you listen to the answers, the simpler they become, the easier they become. We find real love in our lives. We learn to trust it. We learn to remember it and carry it with us so that then finally we can learn to share real love with the people around us. If we do that, we're guaranteed to be happy. We'll see you in a week.